In All-Star Superman, he flew too close to the sun to absorb the extrasolar energy and basically fixed the sun. In Superman number 220, he moved Earth from its orbit to ensure a projectile did not hit it. And if you thought that was too much, in Superboy 140, he chained multiple planets together and took them to a whole new galaxy. But why am I telling you about these super impressive things he's done? Well, that's to ensure that when you hear about his weaknesses, you really understand what they could do to this Man of Steel, this last son of Krypton, who has chosen to become a savior of Earth. And in this video, we will explore all 9 major weaknesses of Superman apart from Kryptonite. But before I begin, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. These 2 small clicks from you will help us tremendously in bringing you more of these marvelous videos. And now, let's begin. Number 1. Too much sadness and grief can overwhelm him, thanks to his heightened senses. Superman may have the strength to move planets and spend tons of thousands of years in the core of the sun for peace and solitude, but he doesn't always have the emotional strength to process suffering, thanks to his overtly good nature and his heightened senses. In Green Lantern Superman Legend of the Green Flame, written by Neil Gaiman, with artwork by Aaron Shanower, Jim Aparo, and Mike Allred, Hal Jordan and Clark Kent stumble upon an ancient Green Lantern battery. This battery, unlike the others, was powered by old magic instead of the emotional spectrum. When they mess with it, the battery throws them into a literal version of hell, complete with fire, torment, and thousands of suffering souls. You might assume Superman could handle himself there, but he doesn't. In fact, he fails miserably. The moment they arrive here, the very magnitude of pain and despair in that hellish place overwhelms his senses. His enhanced hearing and vision, which are usually a huge asset to him, turn against him, and Superman finds himself suspended mid-air. Basically, he gets paralyzed because of shock. Even when Hal Jordan grabs his leg and shouts for help, Superman fails to notice him in the sea of all things painful and agonizing. In other words, Superman's mind and body stop working under the weight of that much human suffering. Things would have gone to hell had it not been for Hal, who forced his power ring to transport them to the Green Flame. Now, the Green Flame is basically the remains of the magic energies of Maltus in the form of a sentient Green Flame. It reveals that both heroes technically died when they activated the battery, and everything they've experienced is part of their fight to return to life. Another similar example could be found in Batman Superman World's Finest number 3 by Mark Waid and Dan Mora. In that issue, Felix Faust seems to trap Bruce and Clark in hell, but Superman breaks them free after figuring out that the realm itself is fake. He doesn't believe in hell, so the illusion pretty much shatters. That optimism, or rather, that realization, makes the events in Legend of the Green Flame even more frightening for Superman, because it only means that Superman eventually learned hell is real and it broke him. Yet another time when Superman fell prey to his own senses was in Zack Snyder's Batman vs. Superman, where Batman uses high-frequency sonic cannons to disorient Superman. Superman's loved ones and love itself are a bigger weakness to him than his family. Kryptonite might weaken Superman's body, but his family and the love he has for them are 2 things that have often proven to be more dangerous than Kryptonite. How? Well, these 2 things often cloud his judgment. While physical weaknesses like green rocks or magic have their limits, his emotional attachment to loved ones goes beyond all logic, and once he gets consumed, he does things that put everyone at risk. In Action Comics number 1060, written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, with art by Eddie Barrows and others, Superman's singular need to protect his family nearly blows a hole through the universe. Nope, I am not kidding. In the previous issue, that is Action Comics number 1059, Metropolis was under a coordinated attack from the Blue Earth movement. To take on the threat, the entire Superman family springs into action, including the likes of Super Twins, Otho Ra and Usul Ra. But Sister Shadow, who was linked to the movement, abducts Usul and takes him to an alternate world called Earth Al Ghul, which is a version of Earth overtaken by the League of Assassins. Here, she rules as Janin Al Ghul, the daughter of Talia and Batman. Desperate for answers, Superman turns to John Constantine, and the 2 of them arrive at the Cathedral of St. Lazarus, where Constantine warns him not to touch anything. Naturally, that's when things go sideways. A glowing hourglass begins imitating Usul's voice, and Superman, for all his strength, could not control himself from doing the only thing Constantine asked him not to do. Constantine insists that the voice is nothing but bait, but Superman touches the hourglass, which, as you may expect, causes an explosion that flattens the building and knocks Constantine out. From the wreckage, two powerful beings named Bloodwind and Etrigan come out. The two had been locked away for ages, but Superman's emotional, impulsive action led to their freedom. Thankfully for Superman, they owed him one and agreed to help him reach Earth Al Ghul. But the damage was already done, as Superman's decision to ignore Constantine's advice led to two powerful demons unleashed on Earth. Clearly, Superman's love for his family is noble, no doubt about that, but it's also reckless. Unlike Krytonite, which only puts him at risk, his failure to control his emotions when it comes to his family puts even others at risk, including those people he's trying to protect. Certain drugs can turn him ruthless and violent, as found in the Injustice Gods Among Us story. Superman isn't easily affected by most drugs or hallucinogens because his Kryptonian physiology filters these harmful chemicals before they do any damage, temporary or permanent. But when mixed with kryptonite, his body can't fight the drugs any longer, and Superman is left vulnerable to their effects. The Injustice Gods Among Us storyline is one of the clearest and darkest examples of this thing. Before the events of the comic, and the game based on the same, the Joker manages to steal a sample of Scarecrow's fear toxin and corrupts the stuff with kryptonite. This hybrid toxin bypasses Superman's natural immunity and enters his bloodstream. And, under its influence, Superman hallucinates that he's fighting Doomsday, but in reality, he grabs Lois Lane, who is pregnant at that time, and throws her into space, and, to make everything worse, her beating heart is connected to a detonator. When it stops, a nuclear device in Metropolis activates and goes off. It is only after the toxin wears off that Superman understands the gravity of what he's done. Later, the grief-filled Kryptonian returns to find Batman interrogating the Clown Prince of Crime. As one would expect, Superman throws Batman to the side and asks why it is that Joker did what he did, and the madman simply says that the last son of Krypton was an easier and more gullible target than Batman. Superman did not want to push himself beyond the limits of his righteousness, but he was left with nearly no option. He loses his patience and kills Joker by punching a hole through Joker's chest, and all that Batman could do was watch in horror from a distance. After this, Superman goes on to build a fascist rule to ensure that such crimes were not committed again. What I would like to bring to your notice here is that although Superman killed his wife and unborn child under the influence of the drug, what he does after that is all on him. The toxin had worn off when he arrived at the interrogation, and he was also himself when he built the iron-fisted dictatorship. So this is another example of what he would do for his family, just how far he would go when he is pushed. Extreme vulnerability to magic. For all the strength, speed, and near invincibility packed into Superman's frame, the one thing he is really vulnerable to is magic, and those who are powerful wielders of magic, as long as they manage to dodge his attacks. It doesn't matter how tough his skin is or how fast he moves. If someone potent like Shazam or Zatanna manages to land their spells on Superman, they will hit hard. You see, Kryptonian biology offers no natural defense against mystical forces. Zatanna, Dr. Fate, Etrigan, and even magical artifacts can put Superman on the ropes if used correctly. Even allies have turned this weakness against him when push came to shove. Alternate timelines have shown Batman using enchanted weapons or magical allies to neutralize him when all else fails. Then there's Shazam. Often matched against Superman in comics, Shazam holds a mirror to the Man of Steel. He flies, punches through steel, shoots energy beams, but unlike Superman, Shazam's power is grounded in magic. Every bolt of lightning he summons, every ounce of strength he has within him, actually comes from ancient enchanted sources. That alone gives him a serious edge when facing the Man of Steel. In Action Comics 873 by Jeff Johns, Pete Woods, and Renato Guedes explains what would happen if Shazam fought Superman. With a city full of Kryptonians to stop, Zatanna and a team of magic users join forces. Freddie Freeman, the then Captain Marvel, becomes the centerpiece of their plan. Zatanna calls out the word Mazas, which is basically Shazam's magic word in reverse, and channels it through Freddie, which results in a massive magical surge that hits Kandor, and, by Zatanna's count, around 10,000 Kryptonians lose their powers in an instant. So, this whole episode shows how a single word can depower thousands of Kryptonians, and would have the same effect on Superman as well. I mean, if focused and coordinated magic can work on 10,000 of them, it would work on one. Especially if that one is Superman. Interestingly, Superman's vulnerability to magic is kept like a national secret. In Justice League number 73, it's made clear that while most of his teammates know about it, the public doesn't. But if Superman ever turned, the League already knows who to call. Lucky for Superman, Doctor Strange will never set foot in Metropolis. Number 5. The Red Sun. We all know that Superman's powers come from the Earth's yellow sun. His Kryptonian cells absorb solar radiation and turn it into strength, speed, and sensory enhancement, and so on and so forth. But change that yellow sun for a red one, like the one Krypton revolved around, and all those godlike powers and abilities will get flushed down the drain. But here's the catch. Under red sunlight, Superman doesn't really become weak, but he reverts to his Kryptonian self, as in how he would have been if he grew up on Krypton, more human-like and less godlike. So yeah, if someone got a huge, translucent red sheet and covered our sun with it, it would spell doom for Superman. No flight, no heat vision, no super strength, and he'd become just a man, stranded far from home without the power to leave. The red sun angle goes back to the Silver Age, a time when Superman stories regularly ranged between the bizarre and the brilliant. Action Comics number 300, written by Edmund Hamilton and illustrated by Kurt Swain and Al Plastino, introduced this weakness in earnest. In the story, Superman ends up 1,000,000 years in the future, only to chase the time-traveling Superman Revenge Squad. Once he arrives, the red sun of this distant era strips him of his abilities. Trapped in a powerless metropolis, he's forced to adapt. It's one of those rare moments where Superman's mind, not his strength, gets him home. That concept later carried over to Justice League's Hereafter episode, which drew from the same storyline. Superman was believed to be dead, but he actually ended up in a post-apocalyptic Earth under a red sun, where he was forced to rely on his sense and sensibilities instead of his strength. Many other writers have also weaponized this weakness. For instance, in Injustice 2, Batman uses a solar red grenade to neutralize Superman during the battle between them. Lobo, the intergalactic bounty hunter, and not someone who fights fairly, arms himself with red sun blasters to keep Clark in check. And it works, because these tactics strip away the powers of Krypton's last sun temporarily and gives opponents a window to attack. But red sun radiation isn't always a threat, and Superman has used it himself, especially when he wants to suppress his powers. The red sun is a plausible explanation for how Clark and Lois could have a child. You see, exposure to red sunlight must have allowed Clark to become physically compatible with humans without causing harm. Else Lois would have ended up like one of those poor victims from Garth Ennis and Amazon Prime's The Boys. Number 6. Atomic radiation. Superman may absorb solar energy like a walking, talking super solar battery, but nuclear radiation throws him off his energy absorption game. Unlike the solar radiation which empowers him, nuclear radiation leaves him drained. In Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns number 4, Superman takes a direct hit from a nuclear warhead. The explosion leaves him almost skeletal and barely alive, with his powers almost completely wiped out clean. He survives only because of nearby plant life and soaks up what little sunlight the flowers stored and slowly restores his strength. I like this part a lot because it's one of those rare moments where nature keeps a hero alive. Guess that's another cue for us to protect and preserve nature. Anyway, what became clear is that nukes probably won't kill Superman instantly, but they leave him vulnerable to others killing him in that state. That idea carries over to Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. After recovering from kryptonite exposure, Superman heads to confront Lex Luthor. But Lex already had a plan B in place as Doomsday, a Kryptonian mutant grown from General Zod's corpse in Lex's blood, using ancient Kryptonian bioforging, a ritual banned long ago. Doomsday immediately does what he was resurrected to do, and unleashes his wrath for the world to see. Superman throws him into the ship's systems, but it's not enough. The creature overwhelms him and hurls Superman into Heroes Park. Now, the fight was in the open, and Superman was losing ground. Doomsday proved stronger, way more formidable than Superman, but more importantly, he was more volatile. The military comes in to help the Man of Steel, but to no avail. Missiles bounce off, helicopters are torn from the sky, and Doomsday feeds off every attack. The US president finds himself out of options and authorizes a nuclear strike. Meanwhile, Superman grabs Doomsday and flies him into space, holding him in place as the warhead closes in. The warhead hits its target, and Doomsday crashes back to Earth, only to emerge stronger than ever, having absorbed all that nuclear radiation. Superman, on the other hand, floats lifeless in orbit. His skin appears charred and hollowed out, and even his energy reserves were completely spent. However, hope came to Superman as the sun rose. As soon as its light reaches him, his body begins to heal from the yellow sun's radiation. His cells recharge, his energy returns, and Superman reawakens and heads back to Earth to finish what Lex had started. Number 7. The Doomsday Virus. Superman may be Superman and the strongest DC hero from Earth, but at the end of the day, he's still a biological life form. And like any and all living organisms, he isn't immune to disease, death, and decay, or is he? Anyway, he might be invulnerable to most things, but not when that thing is a collection of viral spores emitted through the corpse of Doomsday. All it took was the right pathogen and even the Man of Steel fell. In fact, the Doom storyline proved that the Doomsday Virus could take the good old Superman and turn him into one of his most dangerous forms. So, after defeating Doomsday, Superman makes a choice that he knew could change his life forever, and for the worse. Rather than risk the infection spreading to millions, he inhales all the spores of the virus. Needless to say, the effects took nearly no time to appear. His body mutated, and a new persona called Super Doom began to form. Physically, he grew tougher, more armored, and began to resemble Doomsday himself. As far as his psyche was concerned, the virus kept pushing him toward violent outbursts. But I must also note that for the most part, Superman managed to suppress the worst of it through sheer will. However, the infection was super unstable, and the exposure to green kryptonite only helped in furthering the effects on Superman, and his Doomsday persona kept surfacing time and again. During these lapses, his behavior grew erratic, and anyone near him often suffered a fate worse than death. Even Krypto, his loyal dog, showed signs of molecular breakdown from proximity alone. In other words, Superman was slowly becoming a living biohazard. The DC hero Steel, who was a brilliant engineer and built an armor to imitate Superman's powers, also gets caught in the fallout. In his battle with Doomsday, he gets infected too. However, he keeps the disease at bay by encasing himself in an organic steel shell and stays within that thing long enough for a cure to be found. Eventually, Superman fights off the infection while facing Brainiac and somehow manages to gain full control of his body, so much so that he purges the virus from his system. High voltage electricity. For all his resilience, Superman remains oddly vulnerable to electricity. I mean, this does sound a bit strange to me, but to the makers of Superman the animated series, it was fine. But I must admit that his vulnerability to electricity is an inconsistency that surprises many fans. I mean, how can someone who shrugs off explosions and solar flares struggle against a high voltage surge? I was earlier talking about living inside the core of the sun. Well, that's basically one of his fortresses of solitude. But electricity can beat him? Anyway, I'm not really here to judge the creator, so I'll get right to it. In Superman, the animated series, his weakness to electricity was brought forth thanks to this character called Livewire, who was conveniently called Leslie Willis when she was not doing her day job as a villain. Once, she was a popular WLXL shock jock who built her career basically through ridiculing and bad-mouthing Superman. Her on-air attacks earned her a large audience, as well as the approval of people like Lex Luthor. Birds of the same feather, I suppose. She claimed Superman was like Harvey Specter from Suits, someone who didn't really care about real people and that everything came easy for him. Well, that's wrong for both men. But you know how Superman is. He didn't take it personally. During a concert celebrating her 3rd year on air, there was a thunderstorm. Police urged the crowd to disperse, but Leslie ignored them and stirred the crowd into resisting. This, Superman could not take, and intervened because people's lives were at stake here. He tried to de-escalate the situation, but all she did was mock him in front of the crowd again. When lightning struck the stage's scaffolding, Superman shielded her and took the hit, but the bolt arced through him and struck Leslie. This altered her physiology right there and then. Her skin turned pale, her hair blue, and although she survived, she blamed Superman for everything that happened. While recovering in the hospital, she discovered she now had the power of electrokinesis, which means she could now manipulate electricity, recharge herself, and even alter appearance by ionizing the air. She held the city at ransom by creating a blackout, and fought several times with Superman, where she often hurt him and slowed him down by giving him high-voltage electric shocks. He was only able to defeat her because she had this weakness of having to constantly recharge herself. Superman has no real defense against telepathy. We have seen enough things that can hurt Superman physically, but his mind is not foolproof either. That became clear in Wonder Woman number 219, where Maxwell Lord manages what Lex Luthor could only dream of. I'm talking about total mental control over Superman. Leading into the Infinite Crisis event, Maxwell Lord, instead of fighting Superman, hijacks his mind using psychic abilities. Maxwell turns the Man of Steel into his personal weapon, and Superman, now under Maxwell's command, attacks Wonder Woman with the intention of killing her because he now saw her as a threat. Written by Greg Rucka and drawn by a team including Rags Morales and David Lopez, Wonder Woman number 219 shows just how dangerous Superman can become in the wrong hands. Wonder Woman, though experienced and powerful, clearly finds herself outmatched, and Superman holds nothing back. At one point, he tries to throw her into the sun, and although she survives, she learns the hard way that she cannot win against Superman. However, Wonder Woman understands soon enough that she can't break Maxwell's psychic control and that Superman could kill her, so she kills Maxwell Lord himself as an immediate, permanent, and slightly desperate solution. That was all in this one, guys, but if you have something else on your mind, some other weakness or some other vulnerability, feel free to let me know about it in the comments below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks everyone.